Welcome everyone to the FAR Project, our very first pilot podcast that's coming streaming live from you from London, UK. So, without further delay, let me first introduce you to our host, Robster. Over to you. Do you want to do a quick introduction?
Okay, I'm Rob Starr. This is also my very first podcast, and I am currently a civil servant. And one of my hot topics is world politics and entertainment,
And also, not to forgetting, a food critic as well.
and a food critic as well.
And then we have Alza. Over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm General Alza. I'm a banker and the one who speaks the truth.
He may speak the truth, but he also is a man of few words, which we all must listen to. So myself, Fox, I'm also working in the banking industry. Collectively, between the three of us, we have 120 years of experience living in this world. You know, we have different experiences. Each one of us, we kind of had different lifestyles and unique experiences. And also, we also have different understanding of our different current affairs and have different views. I think collectively we also traveled to all different countries as well, so we kind of understand different cultures along the holidays. So this is our pilot session. What is it? What is the FAR project? So the FAR project, well, effectively, it is more or less kind of
We've got
kind
an
of
intruder in the room.
we have true to the root. So effectively, what we're going to do is discuss today's current affairs. So we will do in-depth interviews with experts and thought leaders, provide insightful commentary and latest developments on trends that's happening. And whether you're an enthusiast or a professional, I'm sure you're going to find one of our podcasts value from this show. So without further delay, let's touch base on the first topic that we're going to discuss today. So the first one we're going to talk about is the number of layoffs within technology. So let me share my screen. So everyone must have heard over the last couple of months, there's been number of technology companies which has been laying off a number of people. But did we actually look at the number of the total number of people who have actually been sacked? So when we look at the numbers, when if I can find a good page, where's it gone? So let's look at this in numbers, right? So let's have a discussion. Amazon, globally, they are actually shutting down 18, well, getting rid of 18,000 employees, and also shutting down several warehouse expansions and other projects. And we all know that Amazon have a number of revenue streams coming through, not just through Amazon Prime, but they also do Amazon Cloud and everything else. Do they really need to kind of get rid of these people, or are they just using it to actually pay back money to the shareholders? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Rob? Stuff?
So I think what's happened is this is actually happening in the civil service as well. Is where during the last 2 years, 2020, 2021, and the beginning of 2022, I think one of the issues was an over recruitment of many companies. So I think they've actually recruited in excess. So the ones that they're getting rid of now, I personally think that they're probably going back to pre-COVID numbers of employment within their own companies. So that's how I see it. So because no one was allowed out, everyone was doing everything from home. The biggest winners during the pandemic were the tech companies because we were literally stuck at home. So who are going to be the biggest winners are the tech companies. So
I
for
think you
the tech
touched
companies
on
were
a
the
good
most
point.
resilient.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah,
touched on a good point. So, like
yeah.
during the COVID, a lot of the companies have increased taking people on. And as you work in the civil service, you are able to assess the trend of people who are coming in seeking for
Mm.
employment, right? So have you
Yeah.
seen the
So
correlation between the number of layoffs from the tech compared to other industries?
I think with tech is the biggest layoffs. Finance is not really that much, and physical manual labor, manual work, yeah, not many that much. So um, during the say the recession in 2008, the biggest layoffs we've had coming in was from the finance sector. Uh, this time around, late 2022, early 2023, is mainly from the tech side, from the tech sector. So we do get finance, but we're getting like being trickled in. Same as say retail sector, the the hospitality sector. Again, we're getting little bits and pieces of people coming in, but mainly it's coming from the tech side because in that 2 years, the companies that were the biggest and where their stock values shot up and for example, in the pandemic, Apple hit the 2 trillion, Microsoft hit the two trillion, so on and so forth. Yeah, they're just getting rid of the excess staff, the staff who they meant to get rid of during the pandemic. I think they should have just offered them a 12-month or 18-month contract instead of offering them a 13-month permanent contract.
Yeah.
So if they
Can
did
I take
actually,
a pause there because you mentioned banking, right? So, General Alza, in the banking industry, you work there, you live it, you breathe it. You've been working in the industry for how long now?
So I've been pretty much about 25 years.
25 years.
So
So, what are your recent thoughts apart from the 2008 financial crash? Now we had COVID-19, we had global slowdown with the whole pandemic happening, and obviously now with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Are you seeing anything in relation to, with the number of tech layoffs based on the tech industry versus the banking industry, or even from your own experience?
so in terms of the banking industry, so what we have internally is we have a group of tech guys who are behind the design of systems like severely automated trading systems. So you've got these automated trading systems. A group of developers would get together, they would build these trading algorithms, and through these algorithms they would have different set of codes which in effect what happens is you working in the banking sector. So we've got clients who basically buy and sell shares, pretty much everything that you could invest in the stock market. So what would happen is initially what would happen is you would have people who invest with us. They would basically buy and sell through us. Our trading desk, the traders would make the decision if to hedge your risk or not. Then over time, what happened was because everything's moving in the tech direction, you had the senior management where they've decided that they want to automate certain decisions that which the traders would make. So if you have a certain rules and logic in place, that those rules and logic replace the trader who'd make the decision. So through those rules and logic, you no longer need the trader to execute the transaction. You could have the system doing it with a set of rules in place. So ideally, what happens is, although it's more efficient, um, it reduces human error. But ultimately, it's to enhance internally the platforms that we have, and also to the underlying value is more profitability for the shareholders.
So I think you hit the nail on the head. Profitability to the shareholders. So as Robster said, they overhired of the pandemic. And was there a reason why they overhired Robster, or is it just general bad management decision at the time?
I'll probably say it's a bit of both. Again, the tech industry had a massive boom during the pandemic, and they just needed the staff to, keep things running really smoothly. Because if these tech companies are really successful during the 2 years of the pandemic, then those customers or the clients that they have will always stay loyal with them. So they still had to have a smooth operation during the pandemic, which was very impressive, by the way. Yeah, and so as a consumer, I would expect that 2 year smooth service to continue right throughout. So now that things have settled down and the dust has settled down, that's what I think now these tech companies have, you know,
So
overhired.
one
Not just
thing I'm
that. I think
one
the
thing I'm quite thinking of, Robster, now that we're thinking of this. So think about it. During the pandemic, didn't the government also give corporations money to make sure employees stay in the organization?
the
Did they use
part
that money
the
to
furlough.
recruit more people? Yeah, the furlough money. So it wasn't
No,
just
the furlough money was, it was just,
to retain people to work, or was it just
yeah, is where companies that who the furlough didn't specifically apply to a particular field. It was for everyone. So whether you were a cleaner in some grocery shop, right up until working for Google. So that furlough wasn't aimed specifically at the tech company or the finance sector or the retail sector. So that one was just a generalized a scheme to help any employer who was having a cash crisis, to support the employees. Because remember, we didn't know, the government didn't know how long it's going to last. If it was weeks, it could be months, it could be even go. Some were saying in media reports I was reading, it's going to go on for 5 years.
yes, that's right.
Pandemics in and out, lockdowns in and out for up to 5 years. It lasted for about a year and a half, up to 2 years. So because everything was still up in the air, you'd rather solve the problem now. With the governments, they just throw money at the problem in the hope that, okay, um, you know, we can have some stability in the employment industry.
All right, maybe
So
that's a
I think furlough
question
didn't really
probably we
play a
need to
big
answer,
part.
right? Did these tech companies actually take money from furlough? Because if they don't really have a cash crisis, do they? So
I don't think
I
they do,
think
because remember, furlough was limited. There was a certain point you can claim up to. So someone
okay,
who's earning £40,000, 50, 60, 70. I mean, in the tech industry, you're not on £18,000 a year. You're not on the £28,000 a year. Probably the reception might be, but
yeah,
the guys who are really behind the computers, they're probably earning what, 40, 50, 60, 70,000. And
yeah.
furlough didn't really apply to those uh, uh, that
Large corporations,
yeah,
global industry
global
organizations.
corporations. Yeah.
I think
General
the
Alzo,
issue,
you had a point. Sorry.
yeah. So I think what the issue here is, you've got the corporations who are there for their own interest, which is ultimately it's all about profit, profitability. And then you've got the government where we had the pandemic. So during the pandemic, the government had to, because every, the world was under lockdown. So what would have happened during that period is the government was quite fearful that there's going to be a recession, there's going to be a lot of job cuts. So ultimately, they wanted to maintain that workforce. So therefore, 80% furlough scheme was announced. It's just to keep the average person, the layman, on the streets with a paycheck, because ultimately that layman on the streets, he basically funds the economy. Without the layman on the streets, the economy, the world as we see, as we know it now, it won't survive. But the corporations, they've always been there for themselves, for the
Agree.
shareholders. So even at
Agree.
that, during that period where you had the government who introduced that furlough scheme, because the government is looking out for its people, it's looking out for its country. Without pumping in that money for the furlough, pretty much, the world as we know it, it would have been a different world. But the corporations, they've always been there to make money for the shareholders. And I think this is where you've got two systems at play here. The corporations, the, the government needs greater control over the corporations, not just to be like, if you look at the current energy crisis that we're ongoing at the minute, these energy companies are making record amounts of profit, and the average household is basically paying excessive gas and electric bills.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe this is probably this is I think we're just going off tangent in here, but maybe the furlough scheme is something we can discuss maybe in our next episode. So just going back to the number of layoffs, so we just briefly touched on Amazon, but we haven't really touched on all the other companies. So collectively, if you go through each one of them, Meta, as we all know as Facebook, 11,000 employees. Microsoft, 10,000 employees. But we'll go to Microsoft shortly, a bit more detail about that. Salesforce, 7,000 employees. HP, 6,000 employees. Google, 12,000 employees, and they've also shut down several projects. These projects would have been in flight, they would have spent money on it as well, and they've also slowed down hiring. So what this probably means for us, I think we all probably know, is that they're probably not hiring in key strategic locations where the cost is high, like London, New York, California. Probably looking to hire in low-cost countries, Poland, India, probably other
Philippines.
locations, Philippines, exactly.
India,
Uh,
India, from what I've read, India is starting to get really expensive now. So
you
they're
are
moving
right.
out
You are
to
right.
South Africa, to the Philippines, to I've even heard some Arab countries. Egypt is one of them. Some North African countries they're moving into, where it's much cheaper than the Indian call centers. So um,
Yes, because all right, let's touch on that topic briefly. so, so during the pandemic, there was an issue around offshoring. So, pandemic, it happened. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, banking industries, hospitality industries, they all kind of use outsourcing providers in India, as we know, because they're low cost. But during the pandemic, can either of you guess what happened? What was the biggest issue? You want to
I
take a
think
guess?
something to do with lockdowns in India that closed down a lot of the centers.
That is partially of it. General Alza,
Was
what do
it
you
to do
reckon?
with electricity? Because you've got pretty much everyone over consuming
That is, yes. So both of you
electricity.
are correct. Exactly. So what happened? We had everyone who worked in a corporate office in India. So there was enough electricity grid within the corporate side of India, in the locations, Bangalore and Hyderabad and Mumbai. So these office locations they had enough electricity to for corporations to consume and so forth. So they kind of knew the bandwidth required. So then what happened, right? So COVID happened. A, they were required to all work from home. B, one of the issues, not everyone had a laptop. So not everyone had a corporate laptop. So they're not able to gain access to it. And in order to purchase corporate laptops, guess where they came from? China. So transportation, there was no laptops coming across. There was nothing. So again, that was another issue. They didn't have much laptops to go around. And the third point, which as I mentioned as well, is electricity. So a lot of these people who kind of go into the city, live in village areas or rural areas. Imagine all these people, hundreds of thousands, now working from home, consuming the electricity. Do you think there was enough electricity to go by? No, there wasn't. That had an impact on the stability and the workforce and productivity of the locations over there. So what my observation is, a lot of the companies, what they have decided to do is where the term outsourcing was generally used for outsourcing stuff in India and other Far East locations, they're now calling things such as nearshoring. So nearshoring is where they're now thinking, all right, you're based in Europe, let's try and see if we can utilize countries which are near us but low in cost. So low in cost countries, which are they? Poland, Madrid and Lisbon, surprisingly, and Romania. So these are the kind of four countries which I'm kind of hearing, and I think the reason for those four countries is, first of all, their English is plain and clear, even with the Philippines, I think, as well. And also they're multilingual as well. If you, I don't know if a lot of the people work in Europe, you need multilingual people. So that's kind of now influencing a lot of the companies to do nearshoring and low cost locations. And that's why also another effect, as Robson mentioned as well, rightly so, is the hiring cost in India has inflated a lot. And why is that? And I think the reason why for that, outsourcing must have started what 15 years ago. I don't know when things started to be
Yeah,
outsourced.
but I think from two, it really boomed in about two. I think 2010. That's when it really
Yeah,
boomed.
2010, and I think before that it was the first the very was it the manual labor, right? The retail
Yeah,
garments, all of that used to go over, and then somebody had the bright idea, which consultancy company, I don't know which one of the big four, I don't want to name names. They had the bright idea of, oh, actually we can build a building and have low cost employees doing repetitive processes over there, bang 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 on keyboards, and then the salary then was low cost. Then over time they started offshoring more and more. Um, and then on the flip side, the butterfly effect is they were educating themselves with the money. They were spending money to make sure they um, educated their kind of family members and stuff as
Mm.
well, and that then elevated more roles going there and demand for money. And I think it's a natural cycle, right? The more experience you get, you want to demand more. You want to go to a senior role, blah blah blah. And with the expansion of many organizations across UK, Europe, US, do you not think naturally the wages are going to increase? There's going to be a lot of demand for roles. So, and Rob, so you work in the industry where you kind of observed, where you kind of observe a lot of different people coming from different ethnic groups as such. What's your observation from people coming from overseas to here in terms of comparing, the different type of what I'm trying to get at is, do you get people coming from overseas with different skill sets, like who work in different areas, like banking, in their home
Um,
locations, bring their skill set over here, or do you feel like it varies?
right. So currently, in 2022, 2023, we've got a massive skill shortage. Because on the 1st of January 2022, it was extremely difficult for anyone outside of um, Europe to get in. Now it's anyone who lives in Europe to get into the UK from the 1st of January 2022 was extremely difficult. So a lot of the Europeans have left during the pandemic. During I think the end of 2022, 2021, beginning of 2022, a lot of Europeans have left the UK. So that's left the UK. I think we believe we've got about just a little bit over 2 million vacant jobs just in the UK alone. And the amount of unemployed we have in the UK who are on receipt of universal credit where they're able to work is just I think about 1.3 million. So even if we've got every single one of those people into work, we still have a market shortage of what, 800,000 vacancies still available. So we're not
Wow.
seeing we it's not that there's not enough people coming from overseas with skills. The problem is now is there isn't anyone coming over with skills.
Oh wow,
Right?
that is a good trend
Yeah.
because I think
So
like with the different skill sets, is there a particular sector where you're thinking that there's a huge gap in terms of skill set, like
is the
hospitality
thing
or
is this hasn't. I mean, hospitality was the biggest, but now it's affected all the industries, all of them,
oh
whether it's
wow,
in finance, whether it's in the medical, whether it's NHS, whether it's hospitality, whether
and
it's
has
schools.
Brexit got to do something with it?
Brexit. Well, the 1st of January 2022 was because of Brexit, wasn't it? You cannot come in without X, Y, and Z. So, and that only happened because of Brexit. Now, if
Maybe
Brexit
that's
did,
another different conversation for us to have another time because we can
yeah.
go on
So,
for a
so
long.
before post pandemic, people were complaining that there's too many, there's not enough jobs around.
Yeah.
Too many able-bodied people looking for work, but not enough work around. Post pandemic, there's lots of jobs, but not enough able-bodied people to get into that type of employment. So we've done a total 180 in a space of what, a space of a year, 18 months, 12 to 18 months, a total 180. So the question comes is, I mean, you're gonna have these large corporations, you're gonna have certain NHS where they can go into particular countries and get employees, but is that enough? No, that's not enough.
I agree.
So
I agree.
yeah, so this is
So let's add this on as well into perspective. So if we think about it, so this is the collective what we know so far, right, in terms of what they tallied up. So they got, if I was to count this, there's probably around over 80,000 people which recently got laid off from technology companies, right? Um, and this doesn't take into account the last couple of months, which I know a few people who work for some of these tech companies that they got laid off. So this is the recent announcement they're making, right? So 80,000 people. So the other thing that you mentioned, Robster, is those skill sets. So if you think about it, if you think about my logic here, so we have 80,000 people who have just lost their job, who may have similar skill sets, whether if you look at tech companies, there'll probably be program managers,
Mm,
technology coders, for example, people who may work in HR, marketing. But I couldn't find any breakdowns in terms of what type of people were they were sacking. There could be salespeople, HR, technologists like coders, developers, and stuff, project managers. But the other question I have, we've got a market, 80,000 people with a similar skill set into the job market, and now they're all going to be competing for the next job, um, in terms of looking for the job that they want, whether they're coder. So now there's an influx of people coming in. Now applying for that one job, there could be first probably was like a handful of people applying for it. Now you may get hundreds of people applying for it, right? Because all
mm,
desperate to apply for it. And the other reason, which I want to talk to you about, the impact, if we go into our next subtopic, is that the tech layoffs has impacted international people who are working in the US who are still waiting for their green cards. So I couldn't find any numbers related to this, but if you're a tech employee and you just recently got sacked, if you haven't got a green card, your visa will allow you to stay in the country for 60 days. And within that 60 days, you have to get a job. But I'm not quite clear the US process. But if they want to get a job in another company, I think they still have to sponsor them. I'm not quite sure whether the visa's been paid and stuff. That's the issue. So now what we're going to see is that if you look at the diversity spectrum of this, we may have a huge handful of people who are waiting for the green cards in anticipation, they're working in a tech company, they're secure. Because I know Google, people who work in Google, they feel as though they've kind of secured their jobs for life, but now this doesn't seem like it's the case. Now those people who actually got laid off, who are on a visa, they have 60 days now to find a job.
mm.
And where do they find the job in the tech industry?
That's it. When everyone's laying off, then there's no jobs. So, and this is the thing, isn't it? This whole excess recruitment, it wasn't really thought of the lot on the long term. Short term was fantastic. We've hired these people, they're working, making our company money. But then on the long term is, do we really need them? And now, you lay one person off, and that one person has so much responsibilities and so much attachments, especially the foreign ones who are waiting for their green card. They came with the expectation that they're gonna, once they become, they've reached a certain goal and they get their green card and become neutralized as an American. That's what their long-term hopes were for these immigrants. But now it's all been dashed. So
Ex-
unfortunately, I mean, on the article it doesn't actually pinpoint how many thousands are waiting, but I think more than 50% will be going back to their countries.
exactly. Just listen
But
to
by
this.
summer they'll be
Just
going back to their countries.
exactly. So they have to find a job within 60 days at another company that is willing to sponsor them for a visa. So if you're an American corporation, and it's also mentioned that there's a lot of issues, as we know, that's currently going on at the moment with the rising cost of inflation and also concern around a recession. Obviously, everyone's trying to tighten their belt. And look what's happening. Do you really reckon a US company is willing to now fork up some cost for visas to attract the talent where they can get a local US citizen, with no cost for cost of visas to actually join the organization?
I mean, they will, but I think what would happen is, I mean, why would you go and get the foreign employee in the first place? Is because their skill set is far superior than the local
Well,
employee.
Robster, you say that, but then we've got 80,000 people who have just come out. We don't know the split between the different demographics of, you know, people working on visa and stuff. So you may find a suitable candidate who is just as equivalent as the person who you need to pay for a visa. And also, if you read this bit,
Mm,
so far this year, more than 160,000 tech workers have been laid off. So that's in addition to what we just counted, probably. So if you take all of that stuff on, that's double the number which I just said. Nearly enough.
yeah, yeah. That's like what 200,000 plus.
Yes. So this is scary numbers, man. And this is just the start of the recession.
Yeah.
Azza,
Yeah,
what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, because I think the world's become more technologically advanced. You've got a lot of algorithms who could, so these guys would have come from India and other Asian subcontinent countries, and they would have been behind the pioneers, the engineers behind designing the systems and infrastructure in place. And ultimately, that kind of resulted in them not having a job because all of the tech companies they've built self-sustaining models. So these guys who've literally come in, built the systems, put the rules and the logics in place, and everything's pretty much automated now. Ultimately, led to their um, unemployment. And I think the world's moving in this technological direction where pretty much everything's, we're even talking about autonomous cars. So
Yeah.
everything's going to get more and more automated. So these numbers that you're seeing now, year on year, I could see these numbers, rising even further and further. And there's going to become a point where, when it comes to humanity, pretty much majority of us will be no longer
Needed.
having work.
Yeah.
So this is scary times, and I think this is just the beginning. This is the very beginning where if you if you look in the distant future, you could see this trend is just going to keep increasing.
Yeah, let's yeah, I think you make a good point for the our next topic, which we was looking to get into, but I think it's the right timing. But before we get onto that, so I just want you guys to I just want to call this out. The magnitude of the layoffs is of the likes I have never seen before. There is chaos and confusion, says Tahmina Watson, an immigration lawyer in Seattle who has been barraged with queries from laid off foreign workers. Seattle being a big city, she if
Mm.
she as an immigration lawyer is saying this she hasn't seen anything like this before in her career, then obviously there's something going on that the media is not letting on at this moment. And then the other thing which we discussed probably a while ago is not only are tech companies laying people off in unprecedented numbers, but they're also implementing hiring freezes. Said, and thus there are likely few alternative jobs for immigrant workers. So again, going back to what we said earlier, when we concluded that actually there may be less jobs because things are being outsourced, right? I just wanted to point that out before we move on to the next topic, which Alza kind of um, put forward is the we don't the expectation of what's coming up with a lot of the new technologies as well. Um, so whilst Microsoft have actually laid off how many people? Oh, where's it gone?
It was about 11,000.
11,000. Guess what they did? So it's not like they didn't have no money. They Microsoft invest $10 billion in ChatGPT maker OpenAI. So in addition, this is only January 23rd, literally not too long ago, 5 days ago probably, that Microsoft has publicly said that they are now investing $10 billion in buying an AI tool. What do you make of
So,
that, Alza? Robster?
see, I think with AI is the future. Like as I was saying earlier, I think non-manual jobs will be taken over by AIs. So, like in the tech industry, the finance industry, certain parts of the NHS, it will be all AI. Even some of the hospitality. But I think with the tech company, will be the biggest hit when it comes to the creation of AI taking over um, certain sector roles. I think with other sectors, they will be affected with AI, but the tech will be hit the hardest. As you've seen with the unemployment, with the loss of jobs currently now in January 2023, it's going to get worse in the tech industry.
I
Alza,
think
what's your
what
thoughts?
Yeah, because I think what is kind of scary is the fact that if you look at Uber, taxi service, so with Uber, how many minicab companies have gone bust purely because of Uber? And the fact that you could have an app, and this app, through this app, you could hail a taxi, and it's so convenient, so useful, and for the workers, it works perfectly because then you're pretty much you have the freedom of to work when you want to work. But when it comes to all these companies who would have recruited these drivers, they no longer operating now.
Mm,
So you've got
Yeah.
this one
mm.
guy who had this idea of making an Uber automated app service, right? And that would be a kind of, you know, if everything advances in that way, it's just going to be just mass unemployment everywhere.
Yeah. I
Then
reckon
humanity is
we are
no longer
probably,
needed.
yes,
No,
and
no,
I
I
think
mean,
we're,
if you look at it since Uber's inception, they've always their main focus, their main long term goal was driverless cars, wasn't it?
yes,
Even then, they still don't want human beings driving cars. You know, and Uber have been saying it openly, isn't it? Oh, we want to be the first company that introduces driverless cars into the market.
yeah,
And you know they were doing pilots, extremely unsuccessful pilots. But then the whole point of pilots is you find out the mistakes and you work on the mistakes and you make it better. Like gradually, you know, just like phones, gradually gets better and better, isn't it? So you know, Uber have been open with, you know, they want driverless cars taking people from A to B, and that, you know, I don't see that happening in 50 years time or 100 years time. I can see that happening more in about 10 within within the next 2 decades. I can see driverless cars, you know, using the same technology as Tesla, you know, and with technology year on year out, it just gets better, it just gets better and better, and you know, it's not going to stop. It's improving technology will never stop.
I think we are in the next stages of the next industrial wave,
Revolution,
is it? Revolution, industrial
yeah,
revolution. That's the word, yes. So I think the next industrial revolution is gonna be all about AI if you're using data,
yeah,
right?
mm,
So data, oh, we can have another podcast around the data side of things. But the industry revolution, use of data with AI, I reckon it may well, it may make some jobs easier to do. May not kill the roles, but I think it'll also create roles, right?
no, no. I think with AI, is say for example, you're an employer, you have 100 people, you're a tech company, you have 100 people working under you. With the advancement of AI, you won't need 100. You probably need about 10. Because I mean, if you remember, just before in 1999 to year 2000, when you know getting into IT was the biggest thing, where one company will have about 10, 15 IT technicians. Now you probably just need one who can run a whole company, IT technician. So as the years go by, technology advances and less people are needed to take care of the technology, because the technology now takes care, as you see,
Let me ask you both a
technology takes
question then.
care of itself, isn't it?
Let me ask you both a question. Robster, are you scared
Yeah.
of AI?
I'm scared that it's going to take my job, but I'm not scared of the fact that it's going to become Terminator and Skynet. I think that's a fantasy. But yeah, I do worry about, because with the government, anything to save money, they'll go along that lines. You know,
I
so
agree.
soon,
Same.
yeah.
Let me ask the same question to General Lauser.
I think AI to begin with, it's been built with good intention, but then over time, is that once you realize the capability and how much more lethal you could convert AI to be, that's when it gets scary. So when you've got these
Mm.
big corporations, big companies, where they've advanced AI, and then they realize the potential that they could go through robotics.
Yeah.
This is the part. Everything's kind of built with good intention, but then over time, that intention at the hands of the wrong person could be
Sure.
quite lethal.
I agree. So I think maybe this AI, maybe another podcast session, which we can probably deep dive into
Mm.
different spectrums. And I think the intention here, I think the open-ended question is: Microsoft lays off over 11,000 people, but they still have money in the pot to spend $10 billion on an AI tool. So shareholder value, right? Goes back to General Adams' point earlier. Why are they doing this as well? Shareholder value, right? So for the last part of today's thing, let's talk about ethics in these tech layoffs. So we know a lot of these international people on visas, they also got laid off. Read this, and I want to get everyone's thought on this. Laid off in Labour. So it was probably published 25th of January. Google employee of nearly 10 years is fired while laying in a hospital bed hours after giving birth. New mum says she was unable to make sense of any of it, but sent encouragement letter to 12,000 people with others let go. What do you all make of that? Imagine, you're out, you're on paternity leave, and all of a sudden you get a call or an email to say, "Hey, I think you're fired. See you later."
I mean, this ain't the
Isn't
first
there
time.
law? Isn't there law safeguarding people?
See, this is the problem. America has very very weak employment laws. Where, I mean, this ain't the first time we heard the story. It started years ago, where they got fired over text message, staff got fired over emails, etc., etc. The reason why this is news is because it's a massive company, Google. One of the most recognized brand on the planet. That's why it's what made news. See, American employment law is very, very weak. They can
I
hire
agree.
you, fire you, literally with the click of a few buttons, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
I'm
mean,
not
that's
surprised.
the way the UK's heading as well, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah, they're gonna
the
trash
UK
the
no longer
Is it
employment.
part
due
of the
to
European.
Brexit? Is it due to Brexit by any chance, General Lazar?
Yeah, that's
Well,
definitely due to
it's,
Brexit. It's the
it's always Brexit
Americanization
now.
of the UK, isn't it?
So I think the example I was trying here is with everything going on, you Google where they are an organization who are open for, display the open culture, display good ethics, diversity inclusion, it's one of the top things on their agenda. And but then on the inside, I don't know if things are breaking apart. We have with this mass layoffs, somebody who's just given birth, been laid off, who has been working in Google, bear in mind, for say 10 years. So somebody who's been there for 10 years, who would have known some of the managers, known some of the senior people, and disrespectfully, she was also marked to go on the day that she was giving birth. So
I
anyway,
think
and I think it goes back to you go,
I think the
General
harsh
Azhar.
reality is the world kind of it's all about yes. At the minute, the way things are, right? It's all about making money. It's all about the CEO. Like if you look at Jeff Bezos, if you look at Elon Musk, it's for them. It's about the number, the end number. It's all about making money. So in terms
Mm,
of morality, it doesn't exist no more. So when you're in
Yeah,
that position, when you're in that privileged position, your reputation depends on the final number. How much has the company made in that financial year? So it doesn't matter if the woman's in labor. For them, it's like if you could trim the workforce by 90%, then they
mm,
look at the fact that how much value, how much money it's going to bring to the shareholders. So the world's it's kind of shifted so much where the global elite, there's massive competition there going on who can make the biggest
mm,
agreed,
income
100%.
for their company. So when you have situations like this is where the government needs to step in. They need to have, because ultimately what's happened is the government is being held to ransom by these big corporations. They kind of have all the cards. They dictate. They have pretty much absolute power. So stuff like this, where worker rights, the government needs to kind of, you know, man up and accept the fact that they need to be, because what is more frustrating is these governments, politicians who basically should be um, public serve public servants. They should be looking after our best interests. But in effect, what's happened is they're kind of working for the big corporations
mm.
because they've got probably a side business or shares in these companies. So ultimately, they'll be the beneficiaries.
Yep, I agree. So I think with that, I think we're coming up to the hour. So with that, I think this is it for this week's episode of the Far Podcast. I hope you found this show informative and engaging as we did. Probably start off next time with Rob start telling us a joke. And if you enjoyed what you heard, do give us a like and subscribe. And that's it over from us. Thank you.